We're just watching.
As far as
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. We were just listening to Jill's stream through my stream.
I don't believe in like a dogmatic religion, so I think it's okay for people to have different opinions about God.
But would you yourself identify yourself as a Christian, though?
Yeah.
And again, I'm just asking questions. I'm not trying to put you in any kind of spot, but as a Christian, okay, for instance, right now over on Twitter, my co-host for the Apostate Alliance, Faye the Most Gracious, and a lot of other ex-Muslims are taking heat from this Muslim guy that lives in London named Muhammad. On Twitter, he's known as Muhammad Hijab. And he's been saying some, people that he's having arguments with, he's posting pictures of their wives and saying sexual things and horrible, insinuating violence and things like that. I'm so proud and truly heartened by the fact that many Muslims have jumped into this guy's timeline and said, look, this is not what our religion is about. Why are you saying all these horrible things, to a non-believer? That's not how you handle the situation. They're calling him out for it. And the ex-Muslim friends that I've made on social media, they're the first ones to jump in if somebody wants to act bigoted towards Muslims and to hate on Muslims simply because, they're Muslims. So my question to you is that when you watch your compatriot there, Smokey Saint, go into debates and go into conversations and continually use ad homs and can't just have a discussion without insulting people and using harsh language, is that something that you can stand behind, or would you make the statement now that's not a way to deal with people as a Christian?
It depends. I think as a Christian should always tell the truth, right? So if they're saying things that are harsh but they're true, then there's nothing wrong with that, I don't think.
Well, do you think that all atheists are trash clowns?
No. Well, I think atheists.
Do you personally think that all atheists are horrible, immoral people?
I think they're all immoral.
You think all atheists are immoral?
Yes.
And what do you base that on?
There we go.
What do I base that on?
Yeah. First of all, have you met every atheist that lives on the planet Earth?
No.
Okay, so what do you base your claim that all atheists are immoral?
If you don't believe in God, then you're in a fallen state and you have anger. And so you can't be honest with yourself and you're going to do evil out of ignorance.
Yeah, hang on a second. Just look after your slave there, because it looks like he's such a cutie.
He's pretty happy.
So
I just got him yesterday.
So if you don't believe in God, you're angry, and you will wind up doing immoral things because you're fallen. There's no getting around that.
Sorry. First of all, can we just get a definition of what this man thinks moral is? I have a feeling that will explain to you why he thinks atheists are immoral. Go ahead.
What's my system of morality?
No, just your definition for the word moral or morality.
I can't really define words.
Okay. Sorry, Don. Carry on. You were probably right to go down the way you were going.
So, how about this then? You want to? Because here's the thing. That kind of knocks me off my spot. What you just said, because one of the key things to having conversations with people of opposing viewpoints is to set your terms at the beginning, because oftentimes, because of the fact that many words are polysemous, or that people use them in different ways, you need to define your terms before you can have a conversation. So the question that Simus just asked you is a very valid question of what the word moral means to you. And then you come back with, well, I don't want to really define words. We have to know what your definition of moral is, how you define your morality, for us to be able to have a valid conversation about morality coming from two different viewpoints. Or else we'll just be talking past one another. I mean, would you say that that your morality is based on the Bible?
No.
Okay. Then what? Then please tell us what morality is to you.
It's a pretty heavy philosophical question. I probably couldn't really answer that. Like, if you wanted me to define morality, I would just look in a dictionary. So.
Okay. Well, if you go with a dictionary definition of morality, then I would say that based on the dictionary definitions of morality throughout, say, the last 100 years, that the actions of God in the Bible would go against the dictionary definition of morality. I would imagine you would disagree with that.
Well, I don't really care about the Bible. I think it's just a book, so it's like whatever.
It's just a book.
Yeah.
Okay. So you believe the Bible is allegory then?
What does allegory mean?
Like metaphor, like
yeah, figure of speech. A lot of it. Yeah, I mean, Jesus spoke in figures of speech all the time and used metaphors and shit all the time. So,
well, let me ask you this then: is there any truth in the Bible though?
Yeah, there's a lot of truth, like the story of Adam and Eve, right? Like, I don't necessarily believe that's true, but there's truths about human nature in that story, right? Because in that story, we have the man, and the man wants to follow God and do what's right, but the snake convinces the woman to do evil and eat from the tree of knowledge, and then the woman convinces man to do evil, and that's exactly what we have in reality, right? Women have the nature of the devil and are predisposed towards evil, where men have the nature of God and are predisposed to doing what's right. But
hey,
we don't really have men anymore because
what does the P stand for in P Mars?
Patrick.
Patrick. Is it okay to call you Pat or
yeah, Patrick I prefer, but whatever.
Patrick. Okay, Patrick's fine. Patrick, I'm going to ask you a question now based on your last statement, and I promise you this is a sincere question. Are you a Poe?
No.
Okay. So do you truly believe then that all women have the spirit of the devil in them, but men have the spirit of God in them?
Well, I would say they do have this. Women do have the spirit of God because man was made in God's image, but their nature is that of the devil. So it's up to men to lead the way for women and do what's right. But now in society, we don't have men doing that. We have men following women to get laid, and that's why there's all this evil.
Are you saying that Adam was a beta?
A beater? What's a beater?
Beta male.
Beta male.
Beta. Yeah.
Yeah, when he listened to Eve, yeah, I suppose.
Okay, you said they follow women to get laid. Actually, did you know that some men follow women into battle? Did you know that some men follow women into operating rooms where the women are going to perform heart or brain surgery and the men are going to hand them instruments and sponges? Did you know that some men follow women into college classrooms and learn professions from them? I mean, the idea that you are trying to say that women are lesser than men, or women are somehow less moral than men, that women somehow have a negative adverse effect on men that is innate in them, that's why I ask you if you're a Poe, because you can't be fucking serious about that shit, dude.
Well, I don't think men are better than women. I just think we're different.
No,
And
Jack, it works. It works fine. Every man wants a saint in the kitchen and a demon in the bedroom.
women are more emotional. Would you agree that it's a stereotype that women are more emotional than men?
Yes, I would agree it's a stereotype.
Well, I believe stereotypes are true for the most part. I think stereotype is a word invented by people who hate the truth, right? And I believe it's true that women are more emotional than men. Although nowadays that's not so much true, but that's only because there's no real male role models and all the men act like women. So nowadays,
okay, but wait a minute. Can you think of it from this standpoint?
Differences between men and women, right?
Okay, and there's biological differences, and there's differences of disposition. But think of it this way, okay? That male roles and female roles are things that were established over millennia through interactions through humans. So when you say women are more emotional, I think that what the actuality of that is that men and women both have emotions, and through our interactions over time, women have been allowed to feel more comfortable in letting those emotions out and expressing those emotions. Okay. Whereas, like you just got done saying, acting like a man, men don't cry, men don't,
exactly. Right. And they eliminated that.
But that's actually ridiculous. You have the same
it's not
ridiculous
ridiculous.
Woman does. Well,
it's
the
the
truth?
truth. It's the truth. And what they've done, the devil has created this lie that, oh, it's okay for men to cry. Oh, it's okay for men to be emotional. That's a lie, because the devil wants men to act like little women. So there's no one who is logical.
Crying is not acting like a woman. If you cry over a loved one, dying, you're not acting like a woman. You're acting like a human being. You're not acting like a woman. You're acting like a human being. Human beings have emotions. Human beings cry. It's not an innate female
negative trait.
Yeah, it's an innate female trait. It's a human trait.
Hold on, I want to know.
Have you ever studied Stoicism and Seneca? He would say anger. It's just pure vice. There's absolutely no virtue in anger. The Stoics.
Right. Anger is a secondary emotion. If you're angry,
women are angry. That's the main problem. Women are angry. They raise their children angry. They create angry children. And anger is like a spirit of evil. I gotta check on this.
Where are you getting this? Wait, where are you getting this idea that women are innately angry?
Because they're emotional. And
So
men
because
are logical and not emotional.
Logical thing to say.
I mean, it's the truth, dude. I don't know what to tell you.
I mean,
I'm wondering.
You can say anything's the truth, but you gotta be able to back it up. Here's the thing: when it comes to emotions, anger is a secondary emotion. There's always other emotions behind anger. You can't have anger without underlying emotions. Okay, so to say that women are angry and that's their default position,
irritability, depression. Yep.
Right. It's not possible for anger to be a base emotion, for one thing. Where did he leave? No, here he is.
I think I'm going to just save us the grief, and I'm going to remove him.
Okay. Yeah, I just in that short period, I sincerely, that was a sincere question when I asked him if he was a Poe, because
I'm just getting this image of a fish flopping around inside my boat, and then I'm just saying, before it can suffocate, I'm just gonna.
I was going to. My next question was going to be if he was an incel.
No, he's not an incel, but clearly he's a beta, or beta, as you call him. Yeah. No, I think that's just getting him to admit that he doesn't have a definition for morality, which as a Christian I think is just pretty poor, because it probably means he hasn't read the Bible enough. But then he doesn't think the Bible's all that. So whether
I don't believe everything in the Bible, but there's
secondly,
what does that mean?
Secondly, the fact that he's can't handle reality. That is true. Who fucking can handle reality? And then secondly, getting him to admit that Adam is a beta is just fucking beautiful.
Yeah.
So, there you go.
P Mars, I did that.
God's
I did
creator. No, hang on. God's creation, when he created the perfect man, he created a perfect man to be subservient to women. I mean, that's what he just said.
Because they're angry.
Yeah, real men don't get angry. Yeah,
Real
okay.
men don't get angry.
Obviously never been to war. But then, no, of course he hasn't been to war because he's a beta.
You know, when you say that with your accent, it sounds like you're almost saying beater.
You're saying beater. Yeah, that's what it sounds like.
It sounds like you're saying it's just because.
Like I thought when you were.
But it's funny.
When you
It's
first
hilarious.
said it, you were trying to say that he was like, having a run at the Pope. Flogging the hog.
My apologies. I'll try and
No,
use
no,
it.
nothing to apologize. No, nothing to apologize.
Nothing to apologize for.
That's funny with your accent.
Wonderful.
Like, it's a beater. It's like beater.
Hey,
No,
check
no,
this
no.
out. P. Mars says Jesus was never angry.
Did you read your Bible, Jack?
Yeah, unfortunately, Adam was. And Adam was the perfect man that God created, right?
But see, here's something else I was going to say a minute ago. It's okay. So he had said, like you said, Simon, that he doesn't really think the Bible's all right.
Yeah, why would
There are truths in the Bible. Well, my question to people who make that claim is, how do you discern between the fact
Yeah.
and the fiction?
Yeah, that's a good question because
You discern. Like I have to teach people everything. You discern the truth with your heart and your mind. That's it. Why did God give you a brain if he wants you to just read a book and regurgitate and repeat it? Why did he give you a brain? Huh? Dummy.
Fresh to the motherfucker.
All of my niqab is the disappearance of women, as I've said.
You mentioned Leila Ahmed, Fatima Mernissi. Is your view, as a Muslim and as a feminist, do you think Islam goes hand in hand?
Okay, now I'm going to ask you a question, okay? Do you think this, wear your mask so you don't spread COVID is the disappearance of America and Americans? Do you think they're trying to disappear us?
With feminism, would you call
I mean,
yourself an
I'm
Islamic
talking from a
feminist?
point of view of America, and I know some of you aren't in America, and that's fine. And it's happening in your country as well. So it's universal question, but I'm speaking from the point of view of America.
There was a time when I called myself an Islamic feminist, but I no longer do.
But it says in John 17:8, he came out from the Father. The Father and the Holy Spirit are one and the same. So the Holy Spirit is the Spirit of God the Father who came down from heaven. Humanity to save humanity. Hold on, let me say it. Okay, humanity from Mary and deity. So the
Open, living for the night like it is golden. Yeah, I can't know when I'm never folding. I just wanna dance among the stars. These after hours got me charged and open, living for the night like it is golden. Yeah, I can't know when I'm never folding. I just wanna dance among the stars. These after hours got me charged and I just wanna dance among the stars. I just wanna dance among the stars. I just wanna dance among the stars. These after hours got me charged. After hours got me charged. After hours got me charged. After hours got me
Nazi stormtroopers and students are burning books at the University of Berlin. Into the flames go 20,000 books. Books that shape the contemporary culture of Europe and the world. Books by all those the Nazis condemn. It is May 10th, 1933, and on Goebbels' orders, scenes like this are enacted all over Germany. In the capital, the propaganda minister himself takes...
You know what's interesting? I'm not talking to you, little buddy. Since every society is corrupt due to human nature being corrupt, you can always look at any society and call them evil no matter what. So any regime can go through history and say, oh, this society was immoral and evil and we need to destroy these books or whatever, or statues or anything.
Takes charge.
The age of Jewish intellectualism is finished.
Himmler's Einsatzkommandos have been executing Jews in all the occupied parts of Russia since the summer of 1941. 4 such special action squads murder 1 million Jews. The shootings continue even after the gas chambers and the ovens take over the major burden of killing. The SS at work, a child torn from its mother. They all look alike, the so-called concentration camps. On their periphery, a double fence of barbed wire, the inner one charged with high voltage, contact with which means death. This is how Auschwitz looked to American aerial intelligence in 1944. Photos probably taken because of the industrial installations that were part of the complex. The barracks are not monstrous, at least not lethal when seen from the air. Auschwitz after liberation. Even liberation could not stop the misery overnight, nor halt the death of many too far gone for help. These were found alive. Others more dead than alive.
Paris, 1900. More than 50 million people from around the world visited the Universal Exposition, a World's Fair intended to promote greater understanding and tolerance among nations, and to celebrate the new century, new inventions, exciting progress. The 20th century began much like our own, with hope that education, science, and technology could create a better, more peaceful world. What followed soon after were 2 devastating wars. The First World War, from 1914 to 1918, was fought throughout Europe and beyond. It became known as the War to End All Wars. It cast an immense shadow on tens of millions of people. "This is not war," a wounded soldier wrote home. "It is the ending of the world." Half of all Frenchmen aged 20 to 32 at war's outbreak were dead when it was over. More than 1/3 of all German men aged 19 to 22 were killed. Millions of veterans were crippled in body and in spirit. Advances in the technology of killing included the use of poison gas. Under the pressure of unending carnage, governments toppled and great empires dissolved. It was a cataclysm that darkened the world's view of humanity and its future. Winston Churchill said the war left a crippled, broken world. The humiliation of Germany's defeat and the peace settlement that followed in 1919 would play an important role in the rise of Nazism and the coming of a Second World War just 20 years later. What shocked so many in Germany about the treaty signed near Paris at the Palace of Versailles was that the victors dictated a future in which Germany was deprived of any significant military power. Germany's territory was reduced by 13%. Germany was forced to accept full responsibility for starting the war and to pay heavy reparations. To many, including 30-year-old former Army Corporal Adolf Hitler, it seemed the country had been stabbed in the back, betrayed by subversives at home and by the government who accepted the armistice. In fact, the German military had quietly sought an end to the war it could no longer win in 1918. "It cannot be that 2 million Germans should have fallen in vain," Adolf Hitler later wrote. "We demand vengeance." Many veterans and other citizens struggled to understand Germany's defeat and the uncertain future. Troops left the bloody battlefields and returned to a bewildering society. A new and unfamiliar democratic form of government, the Weimar Republic, replaced the authoritarian empire and immediately faced daunting challenges. Thousands of Germans waited in lines for work and food in the early 1920s. Middle-class savings were wiped out as severe inflation left the currency worthless. Some burned it for fuel. Economic conditions stabilized for a few years, then the worldwide depression hit in 1929. The German banking system collapsed, and by 1930, unemployment skyrocketed to 22%. In a country plagued by joblessness, embittered by loss of territory, and demoralized by ineffective government, political demonstrations frequently turned violent. Many political parties had their own paramilitary units to attack opponents and intimidate voters. In 1932, 99 people were killed in the streets in 1 month. Right-wing propaganda and demonstrations played on fears of a communist revolution spreading from the Soviet Union. New social problems emerged from the impact of rapid industrialization and the growth of cities. Standards of behavior were changing. Crime was on the rise. Sexual norms were in flux. For the first time, women were working outside the home in large numbers, and the new constitution gave women the right to vote. Germany's fledgling democracy was profoundly tested by the crumbling of old values and fears of what might come next. Adolf Hitler had been undisputed leader of the National Socialist German Workers' Party, known as Nazis, since 1921. In 1923, he was imprisoned for trying to overthrow the government. His trial brought him fame and followers. He used the jail time to dictate his political ideas in a book, Mein Kampf, My Struggle. Hitler's ideological goals included territorial expansion, consolidation of a racially pure state, and elimination of the European Jews and other perceived enemies of Germany. He served only a short jail sentence, and after the ban was lifted on his National Socialist Party, Hitler and his followers rejoined the battle in the streets and in the countryside. The Nazi Party recruited, organized, and produced a newspaper to spread its message. While downplaying more extreme Nazi goals, they offered simple solutions to Germany's problems, exploiting people's fears, frustrations, and hopes. In the early 1930s, the frequency of elections was dizzying. So was the number of parties and splinter groups vying for votes. Hitler proved to be a charismatic campaigner and used the latest technology to reach people. The Nazi Party gained broad support, including many in the middle class. Intellectuals, civil servants, students, professionals, shopkeepers and clerks ruined by the Depression. But the Nazis never received more than 38% of the vote in a free national election. No party was able to win a clear majority, and without political consensus, successive governments could not effectively govern the nation. Adolf Hitler was not elected to office, and he did not have to seize power. He was offered a deal, just as the Nazis started to lose votes. In January 1933, when the old war hero, President Paul von Hindenburg, invited Hitler to serve as chancellor in a coalition government, the Nazis could hardly believe their luck. The Nazis were revolutionaries who wanted to radically transform Germany. The conservative politicians in the new cabinet didn't like or trust Hitler, but they liked democracy even less, and they saw the leftist parties as a bigger threat. They reached out to the Nazis to help build a majority in parliament. They were confident they could control Hitler. 1 month later, when arson gutted the German parliament building, Hitler and his nationalist coalition partners seized their chance. Exploiting widespread fears of a communist uprising, they blamed communists for the fire and declared emergency rule. President Hindenburg signed a decree that suspended all basic civil rights and constitutional protections, providing the basis for arbitrary police actions. The new government's first targets were political opponents. Under the emergency decree, they could be terrorized, beaten, and held indefinitely. Leaders of trade unions and opposition parties were arrested. German authorities sent thousands, including leftist members of parliament, to newly established concentration camps. Despite Nazi terror and brutal suppression of their opponents, many German citizens willingly accepted or actively supported these extreme measures in favor of order and security. Many Germans felt a new hope and confidence in the future of their country, with the prospect of a bold, young, charismatic leader. Nazi propaganda chief Joseph Goebbels planned to win over those who were still unconvinced.
Man muss nämlich gut regieren und für eine gute Regierung auch eine gute Propaganda betreiben. Das eine gehört zum anderen. Eine gute Regierung ohne Propaganda kann ebenso wenig bestehen wie eine gute Propaganda ohne eine gute Regierung.
Hitler spoke to the SA, his army of stormtroopers.
Deutschland ist nun erwacht. Die Macht haben wir nun in Deutschland gewonnen. Nun gilt es, das deutsche Volk zu gewinnen.
The ceremonial reopening of Parliament, orchestrated by Joseph Goebbels, aimed to link the Hitler government to Germany's imperial past and portray the Nazis as saviors of the nation's future. The event was carefully staged to reassure the German establishment, including the military, that Hitler would respect their traditions. Nazi-controlled newsreels then gave the impression that the army supported the new government. Though Hitler walked behind longtime President Hindenburg for now, the new chancellor would soon be Germany's absolute dictator.
The day was dedicated to the new Germany, and more than 100,000 school children stood shoulder to shoulder as the car bearing the aged president and the chancellor proceeded through the crowd to the speaker's stand. Whether you agree with his doctrines or not, it must be admitted that the leadership of Hitler has united the German people for the first time since the war. Their almost fanatical enthusiasm is a marvel to the entire world.
Hindenburg remained president until his death in August 1934. With Hindenburg gone, Hitler, by agreement with the army, abolished the office of president, declaring himself Führer and Reich Chancellor, leader of the nation and head of the government. Now there was no authority above or beside him. Immediately, the armed forces swore an oath of allegiance to Adolf Hitler.
Ich schwöre bei Gott, diesen heiligen Eid, dass ich dem Führer Adolf Hitler unbedingten Gehorsam leiste.
All civil servants, including teachers and police, members of parliament and the judiciary, swore an oath of loyalty, not to any constitution, but to Hitler as Führer of the German nation. The economy had reached rock bottom when the Nazis came to power. They boosted its recovery with huge public works projects for the unemployed.
Eine halbe Million erwerbsloser Volksgenossen wurden in diesem Jahr an den Arbeitsplatz zurückgeführt. Seit der Machtübernahme ist die Arbeitslosigkeit um 61 von 100, also um weit über die Hälfte zurückgegangen.
Hitler christened new Autobahns triumphantly in a display of national will that would unite the country and facilitate the secret expansion of Germany's armed forces. In 1935, Germany openly defied the 1919 Treaty of Versailles by reinstituting the draft and increasing its military strength. The Nazis were delivering on their promises to restore and strengthen the nation. Their achievements encouraged many people to overlook radical Nazi policies, or even to support them. In September 1935, the Nazi Party gathered in Nuremberg for its annual rally. It opened with a traditional hymn that added solemnity and a sense of continuity with the past. It ended with a special session of Parliament far from Berlin. New race laws were introduced by Hitler and read by Parliament President Hermann Göring.
Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are hardly deep thinkers. That's the whole point. It's the water bug campaign, right on the surface. But if you ask them, roust them from a dead sleep, what's an existential threat that America faces? Russia, Iran. But number one on the list would be institutional racism. That's the biggest threat we face. Neither one of them can define that term, obviously. Joe Biden fourth, the likelihood of admission as African-American applicants with comparable academic credentials. As one New York Times writer put it, quote, Justice Department working overtime for those marginalized, oppressed, upper-class white students able to go to Yale, looking after Main Street. As if that's what it's about. What would be funny would be to see what would happen if Ivy League schools stopped admitting the low IQ children of famous liberals. White House advisor Peter Navarro was actually thrown off the air for the crime of telling CNN's viewers where the coronavirus came from.
And I will say that this virus that is affecting the United States right now is the
China virus, the CCP
you know what?
virus.
We let you say that once, Peter. Please don't say it again on the show. I know why you're saying it.
The China virus.
All right, Peter Navarro, we appreciate you being with us. I know what you're trying to do there.
I know why you're saying it, the anchor scolds. Right. You're not allowed to say certain things on the air in CNN or MSNBC, or else you might start thinking for yourself. Watch.
The Wuhan coronavirus has now surpassed the 2003 SARS outbreak.
The first U.S. case of Chinese coronavirus was confirmed at one of her hospitals.
Inside that building is the world's first lab-grown copy of the Wuhan coronavirus outside mainland China.
The Chinese coronavirus death toll has jumped to at least 26 people.
The death toll from the Wuhan coronavirus spiked today.
The Chinese virus, the coronavirus that is worrying the whole world.
This comes as the Chinese coronavirus death toll has jumped to at least 26 people and sickened at least 835 people.
Oh, so it was okay to call it the Wuhan coronavirus because it is from Wuhan, probably from a Chinese lab, actually, the evidence shows. But once that became a public relations problem for the Chinese government, you were racist for saying it. So what can we conclude? Actual racism means nothing to these people. What matters to them is whether they can use racial division to advance a partisan political agenda. Where's the
Bürger ist nur der Staatsangehörige deutschen oder artverwandten Blutes. Eheschließungen zwischen Juden und Staatsangehörigen deutschen oder artverwandten Blutes sind verboten.
The Nazi regime aimed to create a racially pure Germany, whose so-called superior traits would make it ideally suited to rule the entire European continent. Nazism taught that racial struggle was the driving force in history. Superior races must battle inferior races or be corrupted by them. The Nazi concept of a national community was exclusive and based on race, as defined in the new laws and decrees. Heinrich Himmler and the SS led the ideological battle. Racist ideas were taught in schools. Some groups, such as Jews, Slavs, Blacks, and Roma, also called Gypsies, were labeled racially inferior. People with mental or physical disabilities were designated unworthy of life. Scientists and medical professionals applied pseudo-scientific theories for measuring and valuing racial characteristics.
The science and the humanities kind of operate in isolation, and that there's not necessarily an integration of, like medical school, hard science.
Racism is real.
And it can not only cause psychological pain,
but also physiological damage to those who experience it.
So today we're going to look at the science of racism, using studies and evidence to see exactly how it impacts individuals, uncover what makes people racist in the first place, and understand what we can do to successfully combat it right now.
Every time a resume comes across somebody's desk, the name on it makes a difference. After sending out over 1,300 fake resumes in response to employment ads, scientists found that resumes with more traditionally sounding black names receive 50% fewer callbacks than those with more white sounding names. Again, these resumes were literally identical, except for the names. This shows how one aspect of racism can have a significant impact on opportunities.
Now, classism is a huge issue. Studies show that if you grow up in poverty, you'll experience more discrimination than people that are wealthier than you. But even when black and white people grow up in wealthy families and have similar education, even though they start wealthy, black boys are more likely to end up poor. One of the major factors can start as early as preschool, where teachers are more likely to punish black students over white students for the same behavior. Even in adulthood, prison sentences for the same crime are 10% longer for black men, and the use of force is 3.6 times higher.
When studying the existence of racism towards Indigenous people in Australia, 45% of Indigenous families reported racism. And interestingly, scientists began to link these experiences to poor mental health status, sleep difficulties, obesity, and even asthma. Which brings up an important fact. Racism can truly be.
Those are like symptoms anyone would have, right? Like, sleep problems? Well, I guess because someone was racist to me, I can't sleep at night. What the fuck? This is so insane.
Be damaging to your health.
Now, racism involves a set of people holding power over other people, and that imbalance in power is what causes stress. And again, this can be measured experimentally. When Latina students were paired with people they've been told had racial bias against them, their cardiovascular stress response went up, compared to those who were partnered with people they told had no bias against them at all. Another study of Korean immigrants found that discrimination was linked to debilitating mental health effects. And the scientific community is now validating how racism plays a significant role in the formation of health disparities.
So much that there are now links to breast cancer, hypertension, and heart disease. The chronic stress of racism can have people leaning on negative health behaviors like smoking and drinking. In fact, the amount of racism that a person experiences in a year is positively correlated to the number of drinks and cigarettes consumed.
Of course, you'd expect that if you go to your doctor, your health would be in good hands. But racial biases exist here as well.
Oh my God, it's white people's fault I smoke and drink? Are you kidding me? This is science, guys. Hey, don't disrespect the truth. There's a peer-reviewed study, okay? If you have a peer-reviewed study, that means it's true, and this is true. If you don't think it's true, you're a flat earth, science denying, anti-vaxxer conspirator. Oh my God. What happened here? Boom.
Hundreds of medical physicians were asked to look over a case of either black or white patients who likely just suffered a heart attack. Those who scored higher on a racial bias test were less likely to prescribe black patients a drug that would reduce blood clots and prevent heart attacks. In fact, half of white medical students and residents still believe in false biological differences between white and black patients, like that black patients are more pain tolerant than white patients because of less sensitive nerve endings and thicker skin. These false beliefs negatively contribute to medical treatment.
And doctors with these biases don't outright refuse care to black patients, and they probably don't consider themselves racist. Yet these biases persist in society and in institutions, which means that many people still hold these beliefs and values. For example, studies show that most people perceive the faces of other races to be more angry than faces of their own race. Now, these findings make some people uncomfortable because it's hard to look at your own bias and where you sit in perpetuating some of these values and beliefs that don't do the good that we think we're doing. Now, the good news is there's a lot that we can do to combat racism and unlearn our own biases right now.
The thing is, we're not born racist. We learn biases from our environment and how we are raised. When children are adopted before the age of 8 by someone of a different race, they actually develop the same facial recognition patterns of their adoptive parents rather than their own race. It shows that our ability to quickly judge other races is learned from our parents or our environment. This is why talking about racism and anti-racism is so important.
And if you do hold racial bias, the important thing to know is that you can change your brain. A study of brain scans showed that a specific brainwave pattern occurred in those with racial bias when they saw a face that they had perceived as threatening. But immediately after, a brainwave from the rational part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, came in and challenged that initial brainwave. Our brains and the neurons inside them are constantly rewiring. This means that you can literally retrain your brain and combat racist thoughts.
And here's an example of how. A study found racial bias lessened after subliminal exposure to counter stereotypes. Participants were shown faces of popular celebrities of diverse races, including Beyonce, and this kind of priming led to decreased bias within seconds to minutes. This emphasizes the scientific importance of representation in media.
This might seem a little obvious, but people who spend more time with different races and different backgrounds show less bias. This is called contact theory, where intergroup contact reduces intergroup prejudice. It's why something like segregation increases racist behaviors and ideas.
And finally, ideas and even science flourishes when diverse people work together. A study that analyzed the last names of 2.5 million research papers as a proxy for ethnicity found that when authors work with people of different races and backgrounds, their work received 10% more citations and prestige.
These are scientifically based studies that we used as examples of how to combat racism. The most important thing is to be aware that racism exists.
Aware that it is damaging.
And aware that it is up to you to combat it all together.
Before the Nazis assumed power, Jews enjoyed all rights of citizenship in Germany. After 1933, the German government gradually excluded Jews from public life and public education. Newly established Jewish private schools provided a safe learning environment for some. By 1938, German authorities had isolated and segregated Germany's Jews, expelling them from the professions and eliminating most opportunities to earn a living.
I also want to thank our boys and girls in blue.
Today we had a rally for small businesses in Oceanside.
Lou Uredale and dozens of others gathered outside his gym in Oceanside today, demanding the right to reopen right now.
It's about the right to work and the right to feed your families. And I don't care if you're a blue or red, you have to work and you have to feed your families.
Some people who showed up to protest the coronavirus restrictions had Trump flags and hats, but Uredale says this fight is not about politics.
I didn't want that when I addressed the crowd at the beginning. I didn't want it to be about Trump. I didn't want it to be about Newsom. I couldn't stop people from showing up to signs because it's their freedom of expression.
Uredale was handcuffed and cited over the weekend for staying open in violation of county health orders. Today he opened his gym once again and says he's taking precautions.
We're following very strict protocols here. We didn't get any guidance from California as to what we can use, so we kind of followed Texas and a few states that they limited capacity at 25%. So I said, well, we're a liberal state, so I'll do 20%, make it a little stricter.
Governor Gavin Newsom says gyms will reopen under Phase 3 of the state's plan to ease restrictions, but Uredale says he can't wait anymore. If he doesn't open, he could lose his business.
I think this is a time for small businesses to be courageous. In the face of a fear of citations or whatever threats that people are made, you have to have the courage to stand up and fight for your right to work.
Uredale says his gym is a community where people can relieve stress and improve their mental health, and therefore should be considered an essential business that's able to be open.
We are a gym for everybody. We are classified as what you call a hardcore gym. Now, a hardcore gym is what the definition of that is people that want results.
While there was no sign of Oceanside police while we were out there, a spokesman says businesses open in violation of county and state health orders are subject to citation. Matt Hoffman, KPBS.
We felt so, why can't we be part of it? Why can't we? Everybody said Heil Hitler like this. I did too. What did I know? I was 8 years old. So my mother said to me, you're not supposed to do that. I said, why not? She said, haven't you been told that you were Jewish? I said, oh, I forgot.
Germany's Jews would get plenty of reminders.
Meine Herrschaften, hier ist Boykott in jüdischen Warenhäusern. Gehen Sie doch bitte weiter.
This sense of isolation that came upon us after 1933, gradual and increasing, it also affected us psychologically. We knew we were in a hostile world.
Between 1933 and 1939, the German government enacted hundreds of laws to define, segregate, and impoverish German Jews.
My sister and I used to slink by those huge banners that were all over the city, and we used to just try not to see them, thinking if we didn't see them, they weren't there. But they were there. That just little by little, that really took over.
Wer selig geworden ist, der weiß, ohne Lösung der Judenfrage keine Erlösung der Menschheit.
The goal of Nazi propaganda was to demonize Jews and encourage Germans to see Jews as dangerous outsiders in their midst. After 1935, everyday anti-Semitism was a regular part of carnival parades and floats. Public displays of anti-Semitism reinforced a climate of hostility toward Jews in Germany, or at the least, indifference to their treatment.
Oh man. Now we have to make fake news stories about fake newses. They used to have the real deal back in the day. Man, humanity's been cucked. After World War II, they dragged Mussolini's corpse through Italy, didn't they? I believe they hung him too, so. But now you just have a noose hanging in a garage stall in your NASCAR race. It's a big deal now.
In March 1938, German troops moved into neighboring Austria. Germany shredded another provision of the Versailles Treaty as Hitler's homeland was incorporated into Germany. It was a disaster for Austrian Jews. Within a year, the Nazis achieved in Austria what had taken 5 years to carry out in Germany. On November 9th, the Nazi Party orchestrated an outbreak of anti-Jewish violence throughout Greater Germany. It was a lawless onslaught that outraged the world and provoked criticism of the regime by many Germans. Jewish businesses that had already suffered anti-Semitic attacks were targeted for deliberate vandalism disguised as spontaneous public action. Party officials directed the SA, SS, and Hitler Youth to destroy Jewish shops and torch synagogues. Over 7,000 Jewish-owned businesses were vandalized. Germans named the violent attacks Kristallnacht, Night of Broken Glass, for the
That doesn't sound familiar to anything that's happened recently, does it? Nah. I'm sure our society's pretty it's moving in a good direction.
shattered windows of Jewish-owned stores that littered the streets. The nationwide violence damaged or destroyed more than 250 synagogues.
After Kristallnacht, I remember driving through Berlin and seeing the synagogues in flames and all the glass on the streets and the people huddled and depressed. They walked around like the victims, like the hunted.
German police filled the concentration camps with thousands of Jewish inmates. The SS released them only if they agreed to emigrate. But Jews faced increasingly restrictive immigration quotas in most countries and bureaucratic hurdles in Germany. A new law, issued in October 1938, required Jews to surrender their old passports, which would be valid only after the letter J was stamped on them. 2 months later, another law prevented the flight of capital owned by Jews when the Economics Ministry froze all Jewish property and assets. Many, who had the means and somewhere to go, tried to leave Germany. Some families sent their children alone to other, safer countries. They could not know how soon the world would be at war. As the Nazi regime implemented its long-standing goal of territorial expansion, aggression against Germany's neighbors initially succeeded without encountering armed resistance. Hitler counted on the reluctance of Britain and Europe to intervene for fear of another war. The German occupation of Prague, capital of Czechoslovakia, left no doubt as to Germany's intent on military conquest in Eastern Europe. On September 1st, 1939, a massive German force invaded and conquered Poland within a month. It was the start of the Second World War. In April 1940, Germany occupied Denmark and Norway. In May, the German armed forces attacked France, the Netherlands, Luxembourg, and Belgium. In June, Paris fell, and France surrendered. The swift and unexpected victory over France avenged Germany's defeat and humiliation in the First World War. It propelled Hitler to a new level of popularity and trust among the German people. In June 1941, the German army, with more than 3 million soldiers, invaded the Soviet Union to wage a war of annihilation that targeted tens of millions of civilians. Under conditions of war and military occupation, the Nazi regime could pursue its political and racial goals with more radical measures. As German troops advanced into Eastern Europe, Germany's power extended over millions more Jewish inhabitants in the occupied lands, where German authorities could exploit existing anti-Jewish attitudes among local populations. Across Eastern Europe, German authorities forced those identified as Jews into tightly packed areas called ghettos. Separated from the non-Jewish population, Jews in the larger ghettos were imprisoned behind brick walls and barbed wire. The German drive eastward was cast as a crusade against Judaism and communism. In the Nazi view, two aspects of the same evil. German soldiers and police officials treated Soviet prisoners of war as subhumans, either shooting them or deliberately causing their deaths by exposure to the elements and by starvation. Millions died in German captivity. On the Eastern Front, racial political instruction was part of regular training for all types of German occupation forces. SS Chief Heinrich Himmler referred to the war against the Soviet Union in an address to his men. This invasion is an ideological battle and a struggle of races. Here in this struggle stands National Socialism, an ideology based on the value of our Germanic Nordic blood. On the other side stands a population of 180 million, a mixture of races whose very names are unpronounceable and whose physique is such that one can shoot them down without pity and compassion. In July 1941, Hermann Göring, Hitler's second-in-command, authorized all necessary preparations for the final solution of the Jewish question in the European territory under German control. As German military forces advanced, mobile killing squads advanced with them. The German army, military SS, and German police units took an active part in authorized mass murders. The Germans and their accomplices rounded up the victims, drove them on foot or in trucks to a killing site, often made them remove their clothes, and shot them. Participants in the murders included local collaborators, especially police, in Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Ukraine, and Belarus. The German killing squads and their auxiliaries murdered at least 2 million Jewish men, women, and children in mass shooting operations. Back in Germany, SS and police deported the remaining Jews to the occupied Eastern territories. In German-occupied Warsaw, the walled ghetto that German Jews entered as newcomers in 1942 was already a place of mass suffering due to terrible overcrowding, lack of sanitation, disease, and starvation imposed by the Germans. Despite all efforts of the imprisoned Jews to find ways of surviving and sustaining their communities, those conditions increasingly led to death for scores of thousands. Most vulnerable were the orphaned children. Originally, German occupation authorities established ghettos to concentrate Jews and separate them from the non-Jewish population. Later in the war, many ghettos served as staging grounds for the transportation of Jews to the east, euphemistically called resettlement by the Germans, who promised their captives better conditions and opportunities to work. People endured unimaginable suffering on journeys that lasted days without food, water, or toilet facilities. Many of the weak, the young, and the elderly died before reaching the destination. The Germans and their collaborators deported roughly 2.7 million Jews and others to killing centers in German-occupied Poland. At the largest of the camps, Auschwitz-Birkenau, transports arrived from all across Europe.
Transports were coming in every day. People with all kinds of different languages. Hungarian, Poles, Czechoslovakian, from Holland, from France, from Belgium, from Germany, from Italy, Russians. They were from everywhere.
My wife was somehow waving to me, and that's the last I've seen of her.
The smell, gas chambers. When I asked, when will I see my mother, I was shown the smoke. This is how I found out where she went.
It took a long time until I started to realize that we are condemned to die. All Jews are condemned to die.
Those whom the SS judged unable to work were killed, often within 2 or 3 hours of arrival. Those who could work would be used for forced labor under punishing conditions. When they could no longer work, they too would be put to death. In several killing facilities, exclusively designed to kill human beings on an industrial scale, camp authorities used poison gas to murder children, women, and men. At these killing centers, nearly half of all Holocaust victims died. The camps of Majdanek and Auschwitz were the first liberated as Soviet troops reached Poland. News of Majdanek's liberation in summer 1944 was met with disbelief. The New York Herald Tribune said, "Maybe we should wait for further corroboration. This sounds inconceivable." In April 1945, U.S. troops in Germany and Austria came upon concentration camps at Buchenwald, Dachau, Nordhausen, Mauthausen, and Ohrdruf. The soldiers saw the camps with their own eyes, and the truth was undeniable. General Dwight Eisenhower, commander of the Allied Liberating Forces, wrote, "The things I saw beggar description. The visual evidence and the verbal testimony of starvation, cruelty, and bestiality were overpowering." In American movie theaters, newsreels made witnesses of thousands more. One commentator said, "To future generations, it must be told."
You know, I wonder if maybe Eisenhower had a change of heart after seeing all that shit. Or, no, I guess, when would his farewell address be? He must have been president after this. No, I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. No, I don't want to. What year was it? I want to know. 61. Huh. Well, maybe he saw, like, what would the future of, like, Nazi Germany happening again, and so he rebelled and gave this speech. I don't know, just spitballing bullshit.
Once man did this to his brothers. In the 20th century, there existed a civilization which for 12 years returned to barbarism. Shock permeated the camps as liberating troops tried to grasp what they had found. Soldiers did all they could to attend to the dead and to support the living. Those who survived faced the slow task of reclaiming their dignity and returning, somehow, to life. The Holocaust darkened the world's view of humanity and our future. As the world struggled to understand what had happened, a new word, genocide, was needed for these crimes. Crimes committed by ordinary people from a society not unlike our own.
inside our own. I bet you lead the way if we're up to you decide. But if not, doggy dog every day on our fellow men we pray. Doggy dog to get by or through life my genocide. Doggy dog every day on our fellow men we pray. Doggy dog to get by or through life my genocide. Like a silver flame, like a suicide, like a giving more.
I especially enjoyed that one. Let's see what's